We are down to the final blend to see who wins this vast fortune in the 8th and final episode of this hit Apple TV show, Drops of God. While Camille's relationships seem to be heading in optimistic directions, will Issei finally share the truth with his sister? Who is going to win the estate? And are there any more tricks up Alexandre's sleeve? Today on The Road Goes Ever On and On, we will finally find out who the true Drops of God actually are. Fortunately for you, we do not have any tricks up our sleeve, but if you do enjoy our content, please hit that like and subscribe button, smash that bell for notification, and of course, full spoilers ahead. And with that, I thought for our very last episode of Drops of God, I would bring a nice Domain de Colette. It is vintage 2021, and I wanted to make sure that I could pass the sommelier test and open this wine for you. So we're gonna give it a go.
I see that's a Beaujolais Village, so as you open that, chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, chat about it, please.
Yeah, so Burgundy, people are pretty familiar with Burgundy, and if you look at the bottom of Burgundy, Beaujolais is technically part of Burgundy. Most people don't really consider it a Burgundy because it is so different. It does use different grape from the prominent red that you see in Burgundy, which is Pinot Noir in Burgundy, and in this case, it is a grape called Gamay. Beaujolais would be like the basic level, and then up from there are a number of villages that are a raised status that are considered to be Beaujolais Village, so that would be a higher status from that. You're moving along well with this.
There was a little bit of a pop, but like
was a little bit of
Lorenzo said, I like the pop. No mildew.
Awesome.
I did forget a towel, so I don't have a towel to wipe it, but none spilled on the label. Domaine de Colette.
You killed it.
We gotta go full out on this last episode, you know? I gotta see what all the hype is about. What a... Oh, it's sunny?
Yeah.
Oh. This was a sunny vintage, clearly. No jasmine, no peach, no quince, unfortunately. But with that, you know, now that this is out of the way, let's talk about that final blend. And boy,
that was wild.
So wild. And, you know, I liked, we saw how Philippe and the lawyer were talking about it, and he was like, let me take a guess, you know, like, this is my vineyard, like, let me see which wine he chose. And I feel like I wish I could see Philippe and Alexandre's relationship, because it seems like they were always at each other, especially how he recognized that the blend was of 13 different grapes. That's crazy. And how close they were.
And you could tell he thought that was a messed up move.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He called him a fucker. He's like, that fucker. So hard to know the proportions when there's 13 different grapes.
Right.
I did notice a little hint that it was 13 grapes. Before we were revealed it was 13 grapes. When we saw Issei and Camille, you know, they're starting to build a friendship. I love it. It's adorable. They're talking about the different grapes and the different wines and how this is, you know, too acidic and this is too earthy. Loved it. Behind where Camille was, there was a poster of Domain
Chassangre?
Yes. So we see that behind there's a poster, and there's grape varieties on the back of their grapes, and there's 13 of them on that poster. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah. I didn't notice that, but they made a point in one of the early episodes that they were in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape is made from there are 13 grapes that are allowed to be in that blend. And I think that was one of the wines, if not the wine, that impressed the Tomine family. So I didn't notice the poster like you did, but I do remember many episodes ago they talked about the fact that they were in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Chateauneuf-du-Pape wines are made from those grape varieties, so I was already aware that it could be that situation, and I thought that was more likely than maybe one of like a different random wine of his. It seemed like that would be kind of a signature, and I even think that might have been the wine that impressed Honoka Tomine for the first time. It might have been that wine, so I think there was kind of like that connection there.
That was the wine that she bought the cases of, I believe.
Yes, that's what I thought, and so that's kind of where my headspace was as to what that was, and that's, I mean, once again, that's just tough to have to blend all of those.
When I was watching that test, like seeing all the bottles, lined out, where she takes the pipette and she puts it into the wine glass, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this is impossible. Like, how would you even know? Like, maybe that was like 1% extra of the Syrah, so now I'm gonna do a little bit less. Like, that's insane to me that they had this palette. And even Philippe was impressed. He said, I wish I had a third of their talent at their age. A third. That's crazy to me.
It really is. And then for them to both do about as well as each other, there was like a 10-point gap between them, which is wild that both of them could pull that off so well when that really was tough. And you could see the strain of it on Camille, that she had to finally, step away at one point because she was just kind of overwhelmed. And I think when she got out of that kind of cold lab kind of interior and, onto the actual estate, hands in the dirt, wind in her face, bringing in the smell from the vines, and she could close her eyes, I think that really allowed her to kind of connect and then be able to put together some of the pieces, because then you see, the lawyer being impressed when she bottles it, and he's like, do you want to taste this?
She's like, nope, it's fine. And just after all the time they had put into it, and watching Philippe taste it, and knowing all his varieties, and he felt like after tasting both of their wines, like it was a struggle for him to decide like whose was closer and whose was different from the main blend.
Right. And it was very clear that he felt obligated to do this, but he didn't want to be the deciding factor on that test.
Right. Now, I did really like how they had this little like dinner for Issei and Camille to celebrate them finishing the test. I specifically liked, Issei wanting to make the dinner. We've seen him cook several times. It's been a very recurring theme of Issei cooking. He cooked for his parents and his mom was complaining. He cooked for, the reporter, and the reporter was surprised that he knew how to cook. So it was cool to show like him being able to cook for this, almost in a way, this is like his newfound family. Like, if things go well with Camille finding out that Issei is her brother, like, his family kind of sucks. Like, the Tomines are not great. So this is like him almost getting a whole new family out of it. And I could see like a family blossoming at the Domain where they're at.
And you could see that had a big impact on him, because at the airport, Issei hugged Camille.
Right.
Which, if we hadn't seen how much he appreciated that dinner and how he was trying to reach out to her, if not for those kind of changes you saw, I would say that's completely out of character definitely for like the Issei we met in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Who didn't have a lot of relationships, who wasn't a very warm person. I think that that was actually kind of one of the interesting things about this episode was kind of the overall tone for me, because this one was the first episode to me that had a lot of like pulling at the heartstrings.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of very emotional moments in this. I think a lot of the rest of the episodes have been, you know, like so high energy, high pace. Like, yes, there's been some, you know, people have been hit with surprises that they weren't expecting, but this is the first one that I felt really was playing with the emotions and doing it in a number of scenes.
Yeah, with the dinner, there's a part where they're all chattering and they're all just, you know, going back and forth. And Issei, like, asserts himself, right? He, like, interjects in the conversation. And the way he says it, he's like, I expected this to be how, if I ever had dinner in a place that, you know, wasn't my home, like, this is how I expect it to be. And at first, it seemed like he was kind of not a fan of it. Like, he was like...
First thing he says is too loud.
Yeah, you guys are being so too loud, touching each other. Like,
not liking it, right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, we're about to have, like, this nice moment, and then Issei just, like, this is so loud, but then he, like, talks, like, we see them when he had his meal with his parents, where it was very barely talking to each other, barely interacting, and how he even said that he loved how this was, and he was so thankful to be at this dinner. I like how he told Camille that they were brother and sister because, you know, they're at this loud table. Clearly, everybody can kind of hear everybody. And he tells her, like, so most of the time they've interacted, they've only spoke English to each other. And this was the, like, one time he spoke Japanese to her because only she would understand what he said. And I thought that that was a very tasteful way. Like, you know, it was a party just like Honoka and Alexander met at that party, but it was at the Domain. I thought that that was a very well done execution on how they revealed it.
I think it was possibly his last chance to kind of do that. And while that is a very public place, I think he did it in a nice kind of private way, and also in a way that made it so that it took a few moments for it to sink in,
right? Rather
than just hitting her with the surprise of, oh, by the way,
I'm your brother.
We're, you know, I'm your half brother. You know, instead, I felt like that was a very kind of classy way of doing it, and it fit in well, and especially, you know, with the effort that he'd done on catching the food and then cooking the food. And then the really nice things he said about the company, it felt like the perfect kind of time to do that. So that was really well done.
Another part that was actually another candle or a cherry on top, if you will, was that, you know, we saw early on in the episode the reporter talked to Issei's dad that raised him. And he was like, I was afraid that people would know that he was half Japanese and not really a Tomine. I thought people would look at me and know that he wasn't my son. And when we see Camille looks at the picture of his parents, she even says, you look just like your dad. Like, you look just like your dad. And that's when he's like, oh, he's not my dad, you know. Actually, Alexandre Leger is, but I did think it was very cute that, you know, his dad was so worried that people would think that Issei was not his son.
It was really beautifully done kind of storyline, because it felt like a no-win situation. You know, that the person who lost was going to lose big.
Right.
You know, more than just not get this, but it was going to dig away at them. The person who won was, you know, was also going to feel bad about what happened to the other person, so it wouldn't feel like a real win, you know. So it was going to be this kind of no-win situation, and yet I think that in the end, Issei gains a family, and then realizes the truth about, like, he accepts his dad as his one and only dad,
right?
You know, and that ends up being his choice rather than just he always thought it was his dad, and that, like, at this point he understands, like, my dad has done so much for me, and none of us have ever thanked him. And I think it's his chance to have a new relationship with the person he always thought was his father, but he wasn't nice enough to, that he now gets to have that real relationship with. And so he won big.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we have an understanding of why the lawyer was so surprised by this test. He seemed like, he has worked with a lot of inheritance. Nobody wins in inheritance, like you were saying. Win or lose, it's not great. So, he's talking about that, and which brings us to what is so surprising about this test, right? Like, the final results, like, you and I were thinking, like, okay, there's the food and wine, there's the
theory,
there's the blend,
blending.
So there's no way that they can tie. And then they tie.
And Alexander had thought about that ahead of time.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Do you think that Alexander recorded 3 videos? He recorded one if Camille won, if Issei won, and then if they both won. And then the lawyer was like, there was a chance that they could both win, but I'm so excited they both won, we get to play it. Now they're both getting it. And, like, the lawyer doesn't know that, spoiler alert, there's another part to the test.
I mean, I think based off of the way that it ended, I think what they said was true, even though I think that's, pretty kind of far-fetched, that they would both tie, and that he would predict that they would both tie, because it really did seem like he wanted Camille to win, but I think he needed her to go through this journey in order so that it could wake up all the wine stuff in her. Like, in pitting her against somebody that he raised as a spiritual successor, that could be the one person that could be her foil to be something so hard to go against that it would make her go to the very top. And in so doing, she would finally be ready for and worthy of his collection. Which is really messed up that was how he treated Issei after everything.
I was thinking that
he was just kind of like a tool
in
all of this. That he thought he had a chance, and that he could, that he could live up to Alexander's expectations. And in the end, he was just being used.
Right.
Which is why I thought it was beautiful what Camille did, as far as kind of like breaking up the empire, making it clear that she wasn't interested in the wine stuff. That was always Issei's passion.
Right.
So like letting him have this stuff, selling off this stuff, all that stuff got wrapped up very well, which was so surprising because it really felt like it was a no-win situation. So I didn't understand how they could get out of it.
Right. I did think that Issei did get the brunt of that, because he felt like at first when they tied, it seemed like this is when I started tearing up, when Alexandre Leger's talking to them both, and he's like, this is what's so crazy about this show, like the range of emotions you feel in that moment, because like Alexandre Leger's like, Camille, if you're still here, like, I knew you guys would get here, I knew you would both succeed, like, you both are the best, and saying these really heartfelt things. I'm like, oh god, it was so cute. They were just trying to bring them together, trying to make them happy, and he brings up the final test. Like, I was so furious. He's like, think of King Solomon, final test, this is going to be the real tiebreaker. And then he seemed so malice. Like, it made me hate him so much. And I want to know your thought on that final test. Did you think they were going to be the drops of God?
Yes, I said that.
All right, I know.
I 100% said that my wife, before we started the episode, she asked, do you have any theories? And that was my theory is that, they are the drops of God. And man, was
I still feel like they are the drops of God, but
yeah.
I did think that they were going to be like, because her middle name was Drop, and I don't know if Issei has a connection to Drop, but it did seem like they were going to be the final answer.
Right. Yeah, so that one really, really caught me out of left field. And it was both a surprise, but then when you think of the way that Marianne, Camille's mother, talked about Alexander, it was completely in line with what she had said. That this is probably all a big ruse and that he's pulling strings, and he does these kind of things, and we kind of brush that aside because it seems like, oh, this is, a dying man's last wish to connect with his estranged daughter. Like, it seems like a chance to come clean and, do this second chance stuff.
Right.
But it seems like Marianne was right, and so it didn't feel unearned, right. Even though it was a big surprise that it's like, he really is a dick.
And Issei, when he's talking to Camille for the first time after the revelation that they are related, is, he's like, maybe he gives Alexander the benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe he set this up so that we could get closer together. And he was like, nope. I set this up because I wanted Camille to win. Camille all day, every day. Did you notice there was a pretty nice callback to the first test? I don't know if you noticed it.
I did not notice.
So, when they went to get the results of the final test, that's the same lawyer's office where the first test began. And then when they gave their answers for the drops of God answer, they were in his house where they answered the first test of which wine it was. So to me, I was getting vibes from the first test. But it was very different where we saw Camille give Issei, when they're getting nervous about the results, Camille reaches for Issei's hand, seeing that there is that connection between them both, which, God, melted my heart.
I love the way that those two came together, and it felt kind of like a brother-sister relationship, where you have feelings of warmth for each other, but also you can really annoy the crap out of each other.
Right. Like with the numbers, where he was like precisely like, oh, you mean you said this, but you meant this. Like, such a brother move right there.
Right. And Camille was annoyed with how perfect Issei was about certain things,
right.
The fact that he could catch fish like that, the fact that he knows exactly what he's going to do with his life when she still has no clue what she's doing with hers, is just like, he's so perfect to her that's just obnoxious, even though she also does like him. Like, that feels like that kind of brother sister, like, you can really annoy me sometimes, but I do love you.
Now, how do you feel about the overall ending of the show? Like, how it ended, like, with Camille taking over the leisure guide? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I know that this is only kind of tangentially related to what you're asking, but I literally had to go online and see if there was additional... If the manga had more than this, for there to be able to be like a season 2 or season 3 or anything like that, because the show wrapped up pretty much everything so nicely in a bow. I don't feel like season 1s generally do that. They always like to leave a little tease, something hang, or even like a big cliffhanger, which is a bit of an FU.
Right.
It's like, really, you have to wait an entire season to see what happened. And this one, it wrapped up everything so nicely. We got... I loved the ending to, my pair of Lorenzo and Miyabi. Love those two. Would still love to see a spin-off with them. Camille's ending was perfect, where she chooses her own path, and it's not necessarily wine. and she does the right thing by Issei. I love the fact, like, Issei's end I already kind of talked about. I felt like everything was really wrapped up well, and to the point where I kind of thought, is that it? Is this show
Right.
over? Which you don't generally see, when you're making a TV show, you want to try and get as much money as possible. You generally want the ability to do
Right.
twos and threes and whatever. And yeah, so I thought it was well done, but I was just really surprised with how wrapped up everything was.
So what did you find out? Is there like more to the manga?
Oh yeah, there's lots of material. Let's see this.
Oh, really?
So there's a quote here that says there are also 44 manga volumes of story arcs for season 2 to draw upon, including
Oh,
plot lines like the search for the 12 apostle wines and Shizuku, the manga character Camille is based on, traveling abroad to find the esteemed drops of God wine. So there's apparently a lot that they can pull from.
wow. Oh, so yeah, in my mind I was thinking it was like probably a short run of a manga, and this was just they were just doing a complete series, cuz like you said it wraps up every plot thread pretty well. Like even we even see Luca at the auction because he's out of the leisure guide now. So he needs to get something, so he's just trying to get these wine that they're being auctioned. He did say Camille wouldn't win. Like he would make sure that she wouldn't win. And technically she tied. So he wasn't wrong.
Yeah, she didn't win, but then she got sudden death, so she
Right. And then she did win, but he said she wouldn't win that one, and it was
right.
true.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
do you think, because I feel like I haven't really seen a lot about the show, like a lot of advertisement, a lot of like hype behind it, do you think Apple will make a second season of the show?
That's really tough, because I don't think we have a lot of history behind Apple where we can see, how quickly do they cut down stuff that's not performing? Do they give it a
Right.
moment? Like Netflix is pretty aggressive about that, where there are shows that actually have very strong fan bases. Like the people that watch it very
Right.
much enjoy it, but it just hasn't had, like, maybe it needs that season 2 to really develop a kind of larger fan base. And they're
Right.
like, no, it didn't hit the numbers. We're just cutting it. So it's tough to say because,
1899.
like you said, with 1899,
Sorry.
it's tough to say because we don't know what Apple is going to do. Like you said, you haven't heard a lot about it because I think critic scores have been great, but it's only sitting at, like, this is still a new show and it's sitting at like number 19 on Apple, so it's
Yeah.
not their top performer, which normally a show should be at the top when it comes out, even if it
Right.
doesn't necessarily hang there long. So I don't know, like what's if they've got somebody that is willing that can see good stuff and is willing to give it a moment. I think it's a great show. I think it's tough because it's in 3 languages.
Right.
It's, based off a manga, so it seems like it could be a little bit geeky, but I don't think it's geeky at all.
No.
The material could seem stuffy because some people are uncomfortable with how tough wine knowledge is, so maybe it could feel like it's stuffy, but it's not that at all. Like I think it's something that people need to see, and then they'll realize that this is freaking great.
Oh yeah. I definitely, I was a little hesitant about, a wine show because I just don't have a big knowledge of wine, and I didn't know how, no pun intended, dry it would be. But I didn't think it was dry at all, and I could see that, of not knowing anything about it could put people off to like not want to watch a show about wine tasting. But I'm really glad we did it because I do think that it's a really good show. I really enjoyed it. I think that it has a good job keeping pace. It keeps, like you've said many a time, like, I know you don't think it's uninteresting, but it takes something that could be very dry and makes it very entertaining.
Oh yeah, the subject of wine sounds like something that, especially when you're down to like one aspect of it, like a competition about tasting, that seems like it could be very boring. And they made it very sexy, very exciting. The fact that they could even do different genres in it, like the wine heist, shows that they could really have fun with this topic. And the fact that they were able to keep it constantly changing, like that trailer, I feel like there are so few trailers that give almost nothing away about the show. When I first watched it, I felt like I had a damn good idea about what the show was about, and then watched the first episode and it's like, basically we've seen everything from the trailer. Right. So anything from this point on is going to be a surprise. And that was refreshing, to really feel like I had no clue what was going to happen. And they did have great twists and turns.
Yeah.
So that was very enjoyable.
I thought the writing was on point. Sound design was great. Really, like, the acting being in 3 different languages, which we've mentioned before, but like being able to, Camille, whether she speaks Japanese or not, she definitely speaks French. She makes it seem like she speaks Japanese. She makes it seem like she speaks 3 languages pretty fluently. And that's not easy. Like that, sometimes I feel like when you hear somebody speak a language in a show that they're not comfortable with, you can kind of hear when it doesn't sound like correct. But in this show, everything seems so flawless, like very, very well done. Like, went to beautiful places like Italy.
And it was nice that for a show with foreign languages, it was nice that a decent chunk of it was actually in English. I know that I know that subtitles can be a turnoff for some people. Right. It can be tough to keep track of the words that are all the way on the bottom and see the action that's going on above it. So I do kind of understand that, and I feel like this wasn't necessarily too heavy on foreign dialogue where you're stuck in that box at the bottom the entire time. It was a super widescreen format, so it's not like it was filling up the whole screen and you're going to miss something way up on the top. Like there was the words were a decent chunk up the way from the bottom. So I actually felt like, as far as foreign films, TV go, that this was something that wasn't too thinky in that aspect and like too hard to deal with. Like there's some of those. I love Dark.
Right.
That. Like that's one of our absolute favorite shows. But it did feel like you had to have 100% full attention. Like you couldn't watch that at the end of the night where it's like, I'm kind of tired, but I want to watch an hour of TV. Can't be Dark. You've got to be like laser focused, right? Or you'll miss, so many details. And this felt like something that you could kind of relax and enjoy a little bit more.
Also, I don't feel like there's a lot of, like in Dark, a lot of what they were saying was like pivotal to the plot of what was going on. That was like, you miss what they say, you might have missed that this person is related to this person and stuck in this time. Where in this one, a lot of the important things, like you said, were in English, but a lot of it also wasn't like so thick to the plot that if you missed a couple sentences here and there, you're not missing the depth of the show.
Right. So I mean, overall, I would definitely recommend this to, as long as you're okay with some level of like foreign language. I think this is something that should be enjoyable by a broad audience, and I just hope it gets out there. And maybe if Apple can give it a chance on a second season, having another round of kind of publicity might be enough to get the ball rolling, to get more people to check out season 1 before, as people are kind of talking about season 2. So that's kind of what I'm hoping happens, because this feels very underrated to me.
I will say though, I am happy that we aren't going to get like what happened with Utopia US season 1 or Utopia US UK season 2, where there's like those threads where like they had a bunch of story, but then the show got canceled. So like, if there is no second season, like, I feel like this show on its own, start to finish, is good. It's complete story. There's no loose ends. There's no wonder. There's no question. It's all set. It's good. It's from start to finish. Good.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree that you can recommend it, and there's no, if it doesn't get picked up, not the end of the world.
Right.
I mean, I'll be a little bummed, but it's not like, oh, where was that storyline going?
Right. There's no cliffhangers.
Right.
But with that, I think that about does it for Drops of God. We have made it. Season finale, finished Drops of God season 8. We were in Comic-Con just this last weekend, so unfortunately, our next video might not be a show, but we do have something special coming for the next week after the show, so stay tuned to see it, plus a bonus episode of our time at Comic-Con. This is The Road Goes Ever On and On. I am Mark. This is Sterling. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.